The Chinese are absolutely leveraging this coronavirus as a world war weapon. The only argument is, did they do it intentionally, or did they do it on purpose, accidentally on purpose, or were they just so intentionally sloppy it was bound to happen? But there's no doubt at all, COVID-19 is an engineered weapon. The horseshoe bat that is the progenitor of COVID-19, the main progenitor, comes from caves 800 miles from Wuhan. There was never a horseshoe bat sold in a Wuhan wet market. It came from the Wuhan biolaboratory. And the question is, and this is what Jeff Nyquist on Monday was getting at, this is just COVID-19. Now that China is shutting down again, now that they've infected the world and they shut down from outward to inward travel, what's to stop them from releasing COVID 2020? In the next segment, I'm going to talk about COVID-19 as a Chinese / globalist biological weapon, a global biological weapon. But in this first segment, I'd like to talk about some of the aspects of coronavirus that I still think a lot of people don't understand, that will give them a better way of looking at this, a better way of studying the news and analyzing the news. You'll constantly hear people talking about what's the numerator, what's the denominator, meaning, how many cases, how many tests, or how many cases, how many deaths. We're getting to the point where there's going to be clarity, because all we'll have to do is really study deaths. All of the death figures that came out of China, I think we can just throw them out. And that's part of their crime, really, in this is by lying not only about the infectiousness of the disease when they knew better back in December and January, but by saying, oh, we've got it contained, our numbers are going down, when it wasn't. That's another lie that basically lulled the West into keeping the gates open to this Trojan horse for much longer than it had to have been. If we had known the truth out of China, if it had been understood more widely, the way that the Taiwanese, who have no illusions about communist China, if the rest of the world had gotten on the war footing that Taiwan got on immediately, we would have saved a lot of deaths. Now, one of the key things that people need to understand when you watch the daily news is that you have to separate region from region, because this is not something like a supernova in space that affected half the Earth at the same day. The way to understand this is like a slow motion, global oceanic tsunami that takes weeks in between city targets, because it takes a long time for it to be seeded and then to spread and then have an outbreak. The reason that Tehran and Milan in northern Italy were the first big Western, outside of China, targets of coronavirus was that they had so much connectivity to communist China. In northern Italy, they brought in hundreds of thousands of Chinese coolies to work in Chinese-run sweatshops so that these globalist oligarchs could stamp "Made in Italy," which is the most valuable part of an Italian shoe or an Italian purse, is the label that says "Made in Italy." So they, instead of having Italians make them, they built their own factories under Chinese management, Chinese coolies, slave labor, virtually, but they make enough money that they were flying back and forth to China. So over their Lunar New Year, the biggest holidays of the Chinese year, there was massive back and forth between Wuhan, China, where many of these Chinese coolies that worked in Italy, massive back and forth to Italy. So the seeding and spreading was huge there early. Then the other place that was early and massive, but they also lie about their numbers, is Tehran, Iran. Under the sanctions from the West, the lifeline, so to speak, for Iran's economy has been China getting in there on infrastructure projects, basically, hooking China on debt. If we can look at this graph a second. Thanks for putting that up. there's a guy named Murdoch on Twitter who is a data specialist. He specializes in making graphs. This is a log graph. So on the left, it's logarithmic. A straight line on this graph means it's exponential. You have to use log graphs for exponential growth. Otherwise, the graph would have to be a mile high. So you can see on this graph, this graph starts when any country had 3 daily deaths reported. Murdoch does this with all kind of statistics. New cases, first death from lockdown. So all of these countries start at the same relative point. And it doesn't matter if it's a big country or a small country, because when you're talking about exponential growth within a group of millions, until you got 60% of the population infected, it's going to act in exactly the same way. So you can see where, China was way out in front, but nobody believes China's numbers. That's a lie. But Italy, we can start seeing legit numbers. And we can talk about whether they're smokers or the smoggy conditions. But Italy got there first. Spain was right behind it. And this is leading me to this 2-week lag that's so important to understand. If you look at what happened with Madrid following Italy, the socialist government of Madrid had scheduled massive feminist rallies, basically, left-wing feminist rallies in cities all over Spain for March 8th. This is when Italy's already in a breakout, a huge outbreak. They had these rallies scheduled. They didn't cancel them. Spain, pushed everybody to go to these massive rallies, hundreds of thousands of people in multiple cities in Spain. What happens 2 weeks later? Huge outbreak. Similar thing happened with Mardi Gras in New Orleans. It's, you go back to the Jaws analogy, Amityville Island. They don't want to ruin the 4th of July weekend. The businesses depend on it. So they say there's no shark threat. Well, in Spain, they said there's no coronavirus threat. That's Italy. We're different. We got a control of this. They actually suppressed deaths in Spain. So then you see a huge takeoff. Now, what's so important to understand is the doubling rate, which in the USA is like 2.5 to 3 days. In New York City, that's our Wuhan. New York City is our Wuhan. So if there's plenty of beds open, 100 miles from New York, that's the preparation for a New York level of outbreak. But we're going to see it spreading out from New York. That's why they're fleeing. That's why they've got, controls on state borders. The first time I've ever seen that in my life. So if you looked 3 weeks ago at the number of New York City cases, 2 to 3 weeks ago, meaning people brought into the hospital, tested at the hospital with a confirmed diagnosis, then the death appears to spike a few weeks later. So when you see a number of deaths today, think about what was the confirmed case number 2 or 3 weeks ago. That's how you have to look at it. That's why people are extremely worried about this all over the country. We don't want to be the dumbasses in Madrid that said, oh, Milan, that's Italy. It can't happen here. It will if you don't put the social distancing down outside of the Wuhan, the New York City. You have to suppress the initial numbers the way they did in Taiwan, South Korea, Singapore. You have to suppress it at the very outset. If you wait till you've got hundreds of cases, then in 2 weeks, you'll have thousands of cases and hundreds of deaths. So they're trying to break that cycle. Now, does this mean Matt's all on board with, mass quarantine for the rest of our lives? No, but I'm just looking at the disease in this first segment as a disease. Yes, the Democrat socialists in this country, the globalists, they don't want to let a good crisis go to waste. If they can wreck our economy, turn us into Venezuela, destroy the dollar, destroy our banking system, put millions out of work, they would consider that a great victory if out of the ruins, we wound up somewhere between Venezuela and China in terms of being a perpetual socialist, welfare state. Once people start getting used to getting this $1,200 check from the government, that's not going to be easy to turn off. It's going to be a big problem telling people, we just can't do it anymore. We can't run the printing presses for the rest of your life. Some people will just say, well, I don't want to work in a bar anymore. I'd rather just stay home and collect my $1,200. So it's creating huge problems. And when we come back from the break, I'm going to finish up with what's happening inside the United States, where I think it's going, and then we're going to begin to look at coronavirus as a biological weapon, a very dangerous biological weapon. So on Monday, Alex interviewed Jeff Nyquist, and I think it was one of the best interviews I've ever seen. And in the interview, Alex asked him, what would be a good title for your segment? And I was really jealous because Jeff came up with a title right off the bat. And I thought about it, and I'm going to title this my segment today, China Plans to Win the Pandemic World War. That's what this is. This is a Pearl Harbor using germs, using virus. It's exactly what it is. Instead of flying in with, Zeros with meatballs on the wings and sinking aircraft carrier or battleships in Pearl Harbor, they're flying under the radar with biological warfare. Now, there's a couple ways that China can win. And one is simply to wreck America, to wreck the West, have us so on our knees that we're begging for China's factories to help, come with the aid packages. Or another way is to sow so much division inside of the USA that we're at each other's throats. And an example of this would be taking these quarantine rules to the absurd, closing gun stores, closing liquor stores, following people with drones out in parks, 100-acre parks by themselves and saying, citizen, return to your house. I would absolutely draw the line there. If they say you just have to stay in your house, you can only go out to exercise one time, and we encourage your neighbors to snitch on, double walkers. This is absolutely what a tyrant's wet dream, and I would totally refuse to go along with that. If I want to go driving in my car with the people that I live with, or if I want to go out to a park with a few other people and not, maybe be breathing on each other at 1 foot, I get it. We're not totally stupid. But if they come to the point where they're saying you just have to stay in your house, because it's not fair that somebody that lives in a little apartment, he has to take an elevator and he's afraid to go down the elevator. So you that live in the suburb, you privileged person, you just can't go in your backyard or walk around the block. Absolutely, we should resist that. Totally. But that said, China would love, one victory scenario for China is to sow discord, wreck our economy, turn us into a socialist country because we've ruined our financial system, and all we can do is print money, which is the road to Venezuela. If anybody doubts about the social distancing thing, the reason for it, all they've got to do, and I would encourage you, go on YouTube or go on Google or Bing or DuckDuckGo and just search for these two words, Guayaquil, Ecuador. Ecuador is with a C, Ecuador. Guayaquil, Ecuador. Guayaquil is one of the biggest ports in South America. It's like a San Francisco Bay in California, where the rest of the coastline is just, very steep and hard, with a fabulous bay at Guayaquil, with total connections to Asia, shipping connections like crazy to Asia. Guayaquil, it's 80 degrees or higher. It's on the equator. So this whole thing about it's like the flu, it's going to peter out in the summertime, forget it. It is ripping up Guayaquil. They do not have a first world medical system to respond. We should be very thankful, no matter what you think about New York City, they're not all commies, but we at least have the resources, and we're strained. If you want to see what happens with COVID-19 without a first world medical system and with people living packed in slums, just Google or YouTube search Guayaquil, Ecuador. It's brutal. It's grim. The same thing is starting to kick off in Manila, which is 30 million people in the Philippines. The president of the Philippines, many consider him now to be insane, like he's got third stage syphilis or something. They have to hide him even more so than Joe Biden. If they put him in front of a camera, they don't know what he's going to do. Well, this guy, Duarte, I can't pronounce his name without notes. Anyway, he is telling China that China is going to come in and rescue the Philippines. When China comes in to rescue the Philippines, they're going to conquer the Philippines. All right? This is going to be a model for quote unquote saving third world cities. A place like Guayaquil, Ecuador, imagine the Chinese coming in to rescue them. They will then have a beachhead in one of the biggest ports on the west coast of South America. They will take over the Philippines. This is one of their blueprints, one of their patterns for how they will win this biological war. Not to mention, it hasn't even broken out really in Africa. They've already been seeding Africa with infrastructure projects, Chinese infrastructure projects, and loading them with debt that can never be repaid. And when the African populations start to die off, which country is going to have hundreds of millions of people ready to fan out around the world to repopulate these areas? As bad as it is in the USA, and I'm only talking about New York City for now, because it's Wuhan, then Tehran, then Milan, then Madrid, then New York City. It's a slow motion tsunami with weeks in between the major outbreaks. But imagine now if we had nothing like what they have in New York and what we're preparing around the rest of the USA. So this is what's going to happen in the third world. They're going to be devastated. They're going to be on their back, and China is going to come in with aid and colonists. Now, strictly in an American military context, we have boot camp shut down, Parris Island, no new recruits. The recruits that are graduating have to stay. We have one of our major CVNs, supercarriers, Teddy Roosevelt, hundreds with coronavirus on it. Sure, if it was wartime, they could throw them overboard and keep doing the mission, but it's not wartime technically, so it's in port in Guam. Guam, if you look at it from China's point of view, is on like the second ring of islands, and it's like an American missile and submarine base and strategic the maritime preposition ships. If it gets loose in Guam, if the carrier can't do its mission, look at how this benefits the Chinese military. Something that's peculiar to a warship. If you know about this biological war plan, if you know that you have had nobody on or off of a ship in a month, just bring food to them, that's it, then you know your ship is going to be at 100% readiness. If you're a tyranny, you can keep people on ships for a year straight. Nobody on, no liberty, no transfers, just the crew. We don't do that in America. Our ships have got, a few percent coming and going every week, which means they're all being seeded with coronavirus. And a Chinese warship that knows this plan will be still mission capable months from now. And that's when, they'll be ready to roll up all these little islands around the South China Sea permanently. The Filipinos, the Vietnamese, they'll fall back from them. The Chinese are absolutely leveraging this coronavirus as a world war weapon. The only argument is, did they do it intentionally, or did they do it on purpose, accidentally on purpose, or were they just so intentionally sloppy it was bound to happen? But there's no doubt at all, COVID-19 is an engineered weapon. The horseshoe bat that is the progenitor of COVID-19, the main progenitor, comes from caves 800 miles from Wuhan. There was never a horseshoe bat sold in a Wuhan wet market. It came from the Wuhan biolaboratory. And the question is, and this is what Jeff Nyquist on Monday was getting at, this is just COVID-19. Now that China is shutting down again, now that they've infected the world and they shut down from outward to inward travel, what's to stop them from releasing COVID 2020? The next version may be more deadly. And while they keep a quarantine around their country, but the rest of the world gets infected with phase 2. I mean, this is very scary thinking. But I mean, and if there is one good thing that comes out of this entire thing, it's going to be the end of globalism. Anybody that suggests building a pharmaceutical factory in China is going to be seen as a traitor. A Hanoi Jane, a Lord Haw Haw, a Tokyo Rose, a Beijing Betty. Anybody that suggests buy Chinese, the hell with them. If nothing else, I mean, we are a continental superpower. We can power it. We can grow it. We can build it. We've got the labor. We've got the brains. We do not need to be infected from Chinese biolabs ever again. So if our economy can survive this thing, if we don't get turned into a socialist hellhole out of this, if we don't go into a civil war, maybe at the end of it, America will be Fortress America that it can be.
Now it's easier than ever to have band.video on your iPhone. Simply go to band.video with your Safari browser. Then you click the share button at the bottom of the screen. When the menu comes up, you simply click Add to Home Screen. It will then ask you to name the app. I suggest band.video. You will now have band.video app on your home screen, despite the fact that Tim Cook tried to stop it. The globalists think you're lazy, but by taking a little bit of action, you can override them, have the app, and then tell others about it so they can get the app. So it's up to you whether you want to defy big tech and click the share buttons below on your email, on Facebook, on Twitter, on YouTube, however you want. Be sure and share band.video.
InfoWars money troubles for us to be able to expand would be over if I got up here and said this virus is the end of the world. We would sell 5 times more stuff. When I get up here and say, I think this is hyped up, I think this is a weapon against the country, we see sales go straight down. A, I'm not going to be immoral. B, if we have a Great Depression, the money will be worth nothing. There'll be war on the streets. So buying into the hype is dangerous. And we've looked at the numbers. Yes, it's a real virus. Yes, it kills people. Going way back, I saw the hype and the gear up, and I said they're going to blame it on Trump. They're going to try to take the economy out. Our media that's been defending Xi Jinping will attack Trump when it gets here. That's why I said get storable food. And yeah, I said boost your immune system, especially if you're older or already have pre-existing conditions, because you always want to be prepared. So we were pre-positioned and said you should be prepping and ready. So we're on this like white on rice. It's important to protect yourselves and to protect your immune system and to boost your overall body's defenses. Turmeric's known for doing that. We have the highest quality, strongest formula that out there. There may be one stronger, but it's the strongest we know of. 95% curcuminoid. Most other turmeric formulas are just raw turmeric at about 3 to 5%. Other ones that are really strong are 60, 70% curcuminoid. This is 95. I paid extra to do it. Very, very high quality at a very affordable price. 97% reviews. People love it. It's so good for your body. Get your bodies today. Real Red Pill Plus. Real Red Pill Plus has some natural stimulant in it. It has all the vitamins, all the minerals, and then pregnenolone to boost it, and that big daily allowance of zinc. Get it in yourself now. Our Vitamin Mineral Fusion has it. We're shipping next day. We're up to the date on our shipping right to your door, and it funds the operation. Vitamin Mineral Fusion also has amino acids, but it's in a dose. It's good for children as well. Children cannot take the Real Red Pill Plus. It's the Vitamin Mineral Fusion children can take. InfoWarsStore.com, and we're about to sell out of the 1 ounce nano silver from American Biotech that we have in the 1 ounces. They're still discounting, though it's about to sell out. We've had this out for like a year now. It's a bestseller. Super Silver Skin Cream with the nanotech silver in it with hyaluronic acid. So instead of drying your skin out with the alcohols that dissipate in a few minutes and all the rest of it, this lasts for days or until it's removed from your skin. And it is the same as the Super Wound Gel, but they didn't have to patent this, so the price is a lot less. The other stuff sold in stores. This is not. So you didn't have to go through that whole process, so it costs a lot less, but it's still super high quality, the exact same silver. Women get this and go, my God, just the hyaluronic acid at Ulta, a tube this big would be like $30. How is this so inexpensive? Well, we don't mark it up like that. So it's got the natural grapefruit scented and then the non-scented in these large tubes that are 3.4 ounces and in the 1 ounce tubes, still available at InfoWarsStore.com. And our Super Blue toothpaste, Super Silver, sold out. It has the same amount of the nano silver plus tea tree and, of course, the iodine. You can't get a better toothpaste out there. It's going to sell out soon as well. InfoWarsStore.com. And that funds our operation. Am I saying that the virus is being overhyped? Yes, but the hype's the reason to get prepared and get ready.